The top diplomats of South Korea and China held talks in Beijing on Wednesday evening with the remit of preparing a bilateral presidential summit next month. But with the recent THAAD agreement fresh in their minds, both sides were keen to emphasize their mutual roles to help repair relations. Guan Jiang-o reports.
We're talking about peace in Syria, very important. We're talking about North Korea. We had a call that lasted almost an hour and a half. We've just put out a release on the call, but we're talking very strongly about bringing peace to Syria. We're talking very strongly about North Korea and Ukraine.
Well, that's President Trump, of course, speaking out about that phone call yesterday with Russian President Vladimir Putin. They apparently covered a wide range of topics, including, as you heard, North Korea, which now is facing new sanctions after the president designated Pyongyang as a state sponsor of terrorism. Well, the next guest says hitting North Korea in the wallet is, of course, a better option than war, and who can doubt that? Lieutenant Colonel Ralph Peters is a Fox News strategic analyst. Colonel Peters, good to see you.
Happy Thanksgiving, Eric.
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving, too. This is actually a redesignation of North Korea because it was President George W. Bush who took it off the state-sponsored list of terrorist states. Ronald Reagan originally did it back in the late 80s. Do you support this and more sanctions?
Of course. Anything we can do to prevent a war is good. Now, this crisis is so serious, with a finite amount of time left to solve it, that we may ultimately wind up in a shooting war with North Korea. But my position is better the threat of a trade war with China than the threat of a shooting war anywhere. And the real key here, if you want to force the stumbling, bumbling North Korean economy to a stop, the key is still China. Now, China has been taking some more positive moves and observing UN sanctions and so forth, but it's still not doing enough. It still is the big key. And we need China to really help us and stop trying to play both sides of the fence.
You know, what are the chances of that? I mean, look, they haven't cut off the oil. They cut off some of the coal, not all of it. They said they were going to stop the banks under that UN resolution passed into September, but that hasn't happened, at least to the end of the year. They haven't kicked out all the North Korean companies, and they haven't, kicked out the North Korean workers who were kicking back a lot of money to Pyongyang. So how can you really trust them?
Well, yeah, you can't trust them. And actually, that's a crucial problem with every American president, Democrat or Republican. They trust individuals, whether it's President Xi of China or Putin in Russia. This is not about individuals. Statecraft is about realpolitik and measurable results. And, that backslapping, we're all pals stuff, we sucker for it time and again. With President Xi, you can't have a nice dinner with him and think you're friends. You've got to demand measurables, metrics. Show me what you're really doing. And everything you said, Eric, is absolutely right. China has been trying to have it both ways. They're getting better.
So what will it take to, make them the best? I mean, they sent an envoy earlier in the week to North Korea, and guess what the North Korean news agency said? That this guy was bringing gifts. There's no mention of any discussion about the nuclear program at all.
Yeah, well, and certainly there wouldn't be, but the Chinese have a problem of their own in their hands now, in that the Chinese always regarded North Korea as a very valuable ally in peacetime and war, focused against us, keeping us preoccupied and busy. But North Korea has now slipped the leash. Even China cannot control it. It's worried about the regime collapsing with chaos in the peninsula, reunification of the Koreas, and the real complicating factor at this point is it's not just China. China's the big player. China is the ultimate key. But now you have Vladimir Putin turning a blind eye, actually encouraging smuggling into and from North Korea, from the Vladivostok and the Russian Far East.
Yeah, because on one hand, if China does cut off some of the oil, as you just pointed out, Putin will then just do an end run and supply the oil to North Korea.
Yeah, there have to be penalties. And for China, I think the sanctions that were announced yesterday, they do go on beyond the merely symbolic. But it was important that a couple Chinese entities were on that. That was a nudge to President Xi that we can get a lot more serious. But ultimately, I do think the key to China reining in North Korea to the extent they can, to the maximum extent they can, is threats on trade. We've got to recognize that China needs us right now economically more than we need China. And we have to be willing. Look, it's better to take some financial losses for a limited period of time than to have a war that could potentially draw on the entire region.
That is certain, especially with the millions in Seoul and elsewhere who could be vulnerable to that. Lieutenant Colonel Rob Peters, thank you. Happy Thanksgiving.
And you and all the viewers.
Of course, and we'll see if one day China threatens to turn off the lights in North Korea to finally give that message to Kim Jong-un.
South Korea and China's foreign ministers met in Beijing on Wednesday. Laying the groundwork for President Moon Jae-in's trip to the Chinese capital next month topped the agenda. The two sides agreed that the visit will take place around mid-December with the aim to strengthen and enhance the South Korea-China relationship. That relationship has been tested over the last year after Beijing objected to Seoul's decision to deploy the US THAAD anti-missile system on Korean soil. Despite the two governments reaching an understanding over the issue and announcing their intent to re-normalize relations last month, Beijing's top diplomat Wang Yi began the meeting warning Seoul that they need to uphold their end of the agreement to make sure THAAD does not encroach on China's national security interests.
There's a Chinese saying, promises must be kept, actions must yield results. We hope the South Korean side will continue to appropriately handle this matter.
Seoul's Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-hwa in turn said she considered the agreement a valuable outcome and hoped that it would resolve difficulties for Korean business activities, referring to unofficial economic sanctions Beijing had imposed on Korea in retaliation to THAAD.
We both realize that continued conflict is in neither of our interests, so we have reached this outcome.
Talks also moved on to North Korea. According to Seoul's foreign ministry, Wang reaffirmed Beijing's intent to continue carrying out UN sanctions, but added that they will use their diplomatic efforts to help create the conditions for talks with the regime. Kang said the two nations should work together on that endeavor, while at the same time making sure to suppress North Korea's nuclear activities. The two ministers are said to have carried on discussions through to a dinner after the meeting, spending some 5 hours together in total.
11 crew members and passengers have been rescued. The aircraft is believed to have crashed during a routine transport flight to the USS Ronald Reagan aircraft carrier in the Philippine Sea. The Navy did not disclose the type of aircraft involved, but Japan's self-defense forces say it was a C-2 Greyhound. Wednesday's crash follows a spate of US Navy accidents in the region, some of which were fatal, raising questions about Navy training and the pace of operations.
Months, dubbed Vilayat. Iran has conducted numerous exercises over the past few years to enhance the defense capabilities of its armed forces and to test modern military tactics and sophisticated military hardware.
Good morning. We just returned from a historic 12-day trip to Asia. Everywhere we went, the American delegation was greeted with tremendous hospitality and tremendous respect. People are respecting our country again, believe me. We brought back more than $300 billion worth of deals, which could reach well over $1 trillion within a very near future. That means jobs for the United States at a very high level. As you know, we've just come up with the best job performance in over 17 years. But this is a lot more jobs. We think the number is going to actually get a lot better. We're going to also put a lot of people that have not been able to find jobs, we're going to put them back to work because they're not registered right now. They'll be registered in a positive sense. Japanese car companies will be opening up and expanding their plants in our country. We work very closely with Prime Minister Abe on that. We're renegotiating our bad trade deal with South Korea. And we started talking about bilateral trade with many countries in Asia. And most importantly, we've made clear to all countries that we cannot continue to be treated unfairly when it comes to trade any longer. It's not fair to our companies, and it's not fair to our workers. Last year, we lost over $800 billion on trade deals with other countries. So we had a negative number, a trade deficit of almost $800 billion with other countries. That's not going to be happening. That's changing. And I explained that to them from the standpoint of Asia. They understand it. Every one of them understand it. One of the primary goals of our trip was to pursue the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. I want to begin this morning by meeting and by talking about the fact that we will be instituting a very critical step, and that'll start right now. Today, the United States is designating North Korea as a state sponsor of terrorism. Should have happened a long time ago, should have happened years ago. In addition to threatening the world by nuclear devastation, North Korea has repeatedly supported acts of international terrorism, including assassinations on foreign soil. As we take this action today, our thoughts turn to Otto Warmbier, wonderful young man, and the countless others so brutally affected by the North Korean oppression. This designation will impose further sanctions and penalties on North Korea and related persons, and supports our maximum pressure campaign to isolate the murderous regime that you've all been reading about and in some cases writing about. Tomorrow, the Treasury Department will be announcing an additional sanction, and a very large one, on North Korea, and this will be going on over the next 2 weeks. It'll be the highest level of sanctions by the time it's finished over a 2-week period. The North Korean regime must be lawful. It must end its unlawful nuclear and ballistic missile development and cease all support for international terrorism, which it is not doing. Today, cabinet discussions will also focus on crucial domestic policy issues. I want to congratulate the House of Representatives for passing a vital and historic tax cut last week, and I'm very hopeful the Senate will do the same very soon. We're going to give the American people a huge tax cut for Christmas. Hopefully that will be a great, big, beautiful Christmas present. With the Democrats giving us no votes for tax cuts for purely political reasons, obstructionists, it will be up to the Republicans to come through for America. I think they will. I hope they will. It's up to the Senate. And if they approve it, the House and the Senate will get together. I'll be there right in the middle of it, and we will come up with a bill that will be spectacular for growth and spectacular for the people of this country. Our tax plan will bring urgent relief to hardworking families. We'll reduce rates, increase the amount of income taxed at a rate of 0, expand the child tax credit, very important, and simplify taxes, as most families will be able to file on a single sheet of paper. We'll restore America's competitive edge so we can bring back our jobs. We want to bring our jobs back to our country. We were decimated over the last 40 years. We want to bring our jobs back to the United States. We'll go from being one of the highest taxed nations in the world to one of the lowest taxed nations in the world. Corporate rates will be reduced from 35% all the way down to 20%, which will make us competitive again, and companies won't be leaving our country. Finally, our tax plan will return trillions of dollars in wealth to our shores so that companies can invest in America again. At the same time, we're working to reduce wasteful government spending. We will hear from Budget Director Mick Mulvaney, who is working with my cabinet to find taxpayer savings in each and every department. The cabinet members that are with us today are working on getting reductions to their various departments, and we think we're going to be able to save a lot of money, even lower than the budgets and the budgets that we're submitting. We'll be working on health care, infrastructure, and welfare reform. We're looking very strongly at welfare reform, and that'll all take place right after taxes, very soon, very shortly after taxes. So we'll be submitting plans on health care, plans on infrastructure, and plans on welfare reform, which is desperately needed in our country, soon after taxes. Today we'll also discuss the opioid epidemic that is ravaging so many American families and communities. Last week I was proud to nominate Alex Azar to serve as the next Secretary of Health and Human Services. I urge the Senate to swiftly confirm his nomination, and I want to thank Acting Secretary Eric Hargan for serving with such devotion and for doing such a great job in the meantime. Thank you very much, Eric. Finally, I want to wish the American people a truly happy and blessed Thanksgiving, especially to our brave men and women serving on our military and our Border Patrol and ICE agents along the very dangerous southern border. As you heard, we lost a Border Patrol officer just yesterday, and another one was brutally beaten and badly hurt. Looks like he'll make it, but very, very badly hurt. And we talk about the wall. We're going to have the wall. It's part of what we're doing. We need it. It's rough territory. That's where the drugs are coming in. A lot of things are happening along the border, the southern border, and we're going to straighten it out. We've already reduced the numbers, and you see the numbers, they're back to 78% down from what they were. And those numbers will get better and better, but we have to stop the massive drug flow from pouring in. And my respect to the families that were so badly hurt yesterday, because they were devastated. Those two families were devastated. I just want to wish everybody a very, very happy Thanksgiving. We're going to be working very hard during the recess in Florida. We'll go to Florida. And I want to thank you all for being here, and let's start our meeting.